The baying of the bloodhounds shattered the mountain silence, and Sarah Lancaster knew they would kill her if those men caught up. She crashed through the pine branches, her lungs burning in the thin Colorado air, her borrowed dress torn and mudded from 2 days of running. Behind her, maybe half a mile back, the dogs howled again, and she heard men shouting, their voices carrying through the forest like death sentences. Her hands were scraped raw, her feet bleeding through her worn boots, but she could not stop. Not after what she had witnessed. Not after what they had done to her brother. The aspens gave way to darker timber as she climbed higher into the mountains west of Fort Lyon. It was September 1878, and the afternoon sun slanted through the trees in golden shafts that would have been beautiful if she were not running for her life. She had seen Marcus Dalton shoot her brother in cold blood over a disputed mining claim, had watched from the ridge as he and his men buried the body in a shallow grave. When they spotted her fleeing, everything changed. Now they hunted her with the same dogs they used to track escaped prisoners, claiming she had stolen from them, that she was a murderer herself. Sarah stumbled over a root and went down hard, skinning both palms on the rocky ground. She pushed herself up, gasping, and that was when she heard something different, the rush of water. A creek, maybe 50 yards to her right. She changed direction, knowing it was her only chance. Get into the water, break the scent trail, hope the current would carry her somewhere safe. She had just reached the creek bank when a hand clamped over her mouth from behind. Sarah's scream died in her throat as she was pulled backward into the shadows beneath an overhanging rock shelf. The hand stayed firm across her mouth, and a low voice spoke directly into her ear. "Do not make a sound. I am going to help you, but you have to trust me right now." She went rigid, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. The man holding her was tall, she could feel that much, and he smelled of leather and wood smoke and horse. Not the cologne that Marcus Dalton wore, not the whiskey stench of his hired guns. "I am going to move my hand," the voice said. "Not if you understand." Sarah nodded frantically. The hand lifted away and she spun around to face her captor. He was younger than she expected, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of Colorado sage. He wore typical cowboy gear, a worn leather vest over a blue shirt, dusty trousers, and boots that had seen plenty of miles. A revolver hung at his hip, and his hands were steady as he assessed her with a quick, measuring look. "Those Dalton's men hunting you?" he asked quietly. "Yes, how did you know? Been tracking them for 2 days. Saw what they did to that prospector up near Clear Creek." His jaw tightened. "Your kin, my brother," her voice cracked. "They murdered him. Marcus Dalton murdered him, and I saw it happen." The cowboy nodded once, his expression hardening. "I am Tobias Everett. I work for the territorial marshal, tracking down claim jumpers and worse. We have had our eye on Dalton for months. If you saw him kill your brother, your testimony could hang him." "If I live that long," Sarah whispered, "you will." Something in his voice made her believe it. "But we have got to move fast. Those dogs will be here in minutes." Tobias pulled off his vest and then his shirt, revealing an undershirt beneath. He handed her the outer shirt. "Put this on. Trade me that dress." "What?" "Trust me. Quick now." Sarah turned her back and stripped off the torn dress with shaking hands, pulling on his shirt. It hung on her like a tent, but it was warm and smelled like him. Safe somehow. She handed back the dress without looking at him. When she turned around, he had already dunked the dress in the creek and was tying it around a sturdy branch. "Stay here. Do not move, no matter what you hear." He disappeared into the forest, moving with a silence that seemed impossible for a man his size. Sarah crouched beneath the rock shelf, her whole body trembling. The dogs were closer now, their baying frenzied as they closed in on the creek. 10 minutes passed. 15. Then she heard them burst through the undergrowth, 3 huge bloodhounds straining at their leashes, foam flecking their jowls. Behind them came 4 men on horseback, Marcus Dalton in the lead on a big roan stallion. He was a heavy-set man in his 40s, with a face that might have been handsome once before greed and cruelty twisted it. "She went in the water," one of the men shouted, pointing at the obvious tracks Sarah had left at the creek bank. The dogs plunged into the stream, baying wildly. They surged downstream, pulling their handlers with them, following the scent of Sarah's dress that Tobias had dragged through the current. Dalton and his men spurred their horses after them, splashing through the shallow water. "She cannot get far," Dalton's voice rang out. "When you find her, bring her to me alive. I want to know if she told anyone what she saw." They disappeared around a bend in the creek, and still Sarah did not move. She had learned patience working her brother's claim, panning for gold in freezing water for 12 hours at a stretch. She could wait. Tobias materialized beside her so suddenly she nearly cried out. He put a finger to his lips and gestured for her to follow. They moved away from the creek, heading upslope through timber so thick the sunlight barely penetrated. He walked with the careful precision of a man who knew how to move through the wilderness without leaving tracks, and Sarah did her best to match his steps. They climbed for what felt like hours. Sarah's legs screamed and her lungs felt like they were filled with ground glass, but she did not complain. Tobias never looked back, never asked if she needed rest. He trusted her to keep up, and somehow that made her able to do it. Finally, as the sun was touching the western peaks, they reached a small box canyon hidden in the high country. A lean shelter stood against the rock wall, nearly invisible unless you knew it was there. A single horse, a sturdy bay gelding, was picketed in the grass nearby. "You can rest here," Tobias said. "They will not find this place. I have been using it as a base camp for 2 weeks." Sarah collapsed onto a log near the cold fire pit, her whole body shaking with exhaustion and delayed shock. Now that she had stopped moving, everything caught up with her. Her brother was dead. Marcus Dalton had killed him and she had watched it happen, too far away to stop it, too terrified to do anything but run. She put her face in her hands and wept. She felt rather than heard Tobias move closer. He did not touch her, did not try to shush her or tell her it would be all right. He just sat nearby, a solid presence, and let her grieve. When the tears finally stopped, full dark had fallen. Tobias had built a tiny fire, barely enough to give off heat, carefully positioned so the canyon walls would hide the light and disperse the smoke. He handed her a tin cup of coffee and a piece of jerky. "Eat," he said. "When did you last have food?" Sarah tried to remember. "Yesterday morning." "Maybe. Eat all of it. Tomorrow is going to be hard." She gnawed on the jerky, surprised by how good it tasted. The coffee was strong and bitter and perfect. Tobias sat across the fire from her, his face shadowed, watching the canyon entrance with the alertness of a man who had learned not to trust the night. "Why are you helping me?" Sarah asked finally. "You do not know me. This is not your fight." "Yes, it is." His voice was quiet but firm. "I told you I work for the territorial marshal. Been on Dalton's trail since he murdered a federal land agent 6 months ago. Could never prove it, never get anyone to testify. They are all too scared." He looked at her across the flames. "But you saw him kill your brother. You will testify." "If I live to testify, you will." That certainty again, like a promise made of iron. "I will make sure of it." "Why?" The question came out as a whisper. "Why do you care so much?" Tobias was silent for a long moment, staring into the fire. "My father was a marshal in Kansas. When I was 12, he went after a gang of claim jumpers who had killed 3 prospectors. No one would testify, too frightened. He went after them anyway, alone, because it was the right thing to do." His jaw worked. They ambushed him, left him to die in a ditch. I found him the next morning. I am sorry, Sarah said softly. I swore I would never let that happen to anyone else if I could stop it. I would never let murderers walk free because people were too scared to stand up. He met her eyes. Your brother deserves justice. You deserve to live. And Marcus Dalton deserves to hang. Something in Sarah's chest loosened at those words. She had felt so alone since her brother died, since she started running. But here was this man, this stranger, who had risked his life to save hers and was promising to see justice done. What is your plan? She asked. First, keep you alive. Dalton will search these mountains for days if he has to. We have to stay hidden, keep laying false trails to throw him off. Then, when it is safe, we get you to Denver. The territorial marshal is there. You give your testimony and we bring Dalton in. Denver is 150 miles from here. Closer to 200 the way we will have to go, staying off the main roads. Tobias poked at the fire with a stick. It will take us 2 weeks, maybe 3. Can you ride? Well enough. Then we leave before dawn. There is a cabin I know about 3 days north of here, up near Leadville. We can hole up there for a few days. Let Dalton think you have gone south toward New Mexico. Then we will circle around and head for Denver. Sarah nodded, trying to imagine 2 or 3 weeks alone in the wilderness with this quiet, intense man who had saved her life. The thought should have frightened her, but it did not. Instead, she felt something else, something she could not quite name. Safety, maybe, or trust. Or perhaps just the beginning of understanding that she was not alone anymore. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the mountains. An owl hooted somewhere in the darkness. The horse shuffled and snorted softly. The fire crackled and popped, sending tiny sparks spiraling up toward the stars. You should sleep, Tobias said eventually. I will keep watch. You need rest too. I will sleep when you are safe in Denver. His tone left no room for argument. Sarah lay down near the fire, using her bundled-up dress as a pillow, and pulled a blanket around herself. She thought she was too frightened and grief-stricken to sleep, but exhaustion pulled her under within minutes. She woke once in the deep night to find Tobias sitting in exactly the same position, still watching the canyon entrance, the firelight playing across his serious face. She felt a strange flutter in her chest looking at him. This man who had appointed himself her protector, who had given up his own safety to keep her alive. Then she slept again and dreamed of nothing. They left while the stars were still bright overhead, Tobias covering their tracks with a care that bordered on obsessive. Sarah rode behind him on the bay, her arms around his waist, feeling the solid strength of him through his vest. The horse was sure-footed and steady, picking its way along trails that Sarah could barely see in the pre-dawn darkness. As the sun rose, painting the peaks gold and rose, they were already miles from the canyon, heading north through country so wild, it seemed like no human had ever touched it. Pine forests gave way to high meadows still dotted with late summer wildflowers. Streams ran clear and cold, and elk bugled in the distance. Around mid-morning, Tobias stopped at a creek to water the horse. He helped Sarah down, his hands strong and careful on her waist, and she felt her face flush at the contact. She turned away quickly, pretending to study the landscape. We need to talk about your story, Tobias said, filling his canteen. If anyone stops us, you are my wife. We are heading to Leadville where I have work at the mines. Got married in Fort Lyon last month. Keep it simple, do not offer details unless asked. Your wife. Sarah's voice came out strange and she cleared her throat. All right. Sarah Everett. He said it like he was testing how it sounded. Something in his expression shifted, softened almost imperceptibly. It suits you. Her heart did an odd little skip. Thank you for everything. I still do not understand why you are doing this, but thank you. You already thanked me." He looked at her fully, and the morning light caught the green in his eyes. "And I told you why, because it is right, because your brother deserves justice." He hesitated, then added more quietly, "And because when I saw you running through those woods yesterday, so scared but still fighting, still trying to survive, I knew I could not let anything happen to you." The words hung in the air between them, meaning more than they said. Sarah felt heat climb up her neck. "We should keep moving," Tobias said, breaking the moment. But when he helped her back onto the horse, his hands lingered just a fraction longer than necessary. They rode through the day, stopping only briefly to rest the horse and eat a cold meal of hardtack and dried apples. Tobias kept them to game trails and stream beds, places where tracks would not show. Twice he made Sarah wait while he scouted ahead, and both times he came back satisfied that they were alone in the wilderness. As afternoon waned, they climbed into country so high the trees grew stunted and twisted. The air was thin and cold, and Sarah was grateful for the warmth of Tobias's body in front of her, the solid reality of him keeping the fear at bay. "There," Tobias said suddenly, pointing. Sarah followed his gesture and saw them, a line of riders maybe 2 miles to the east, following a ridge line. Even at this distance, she could see the dogs ranging ahead of the horses. "Dalton," she whispered. "Has to be. They are searching in a grid pattern, covering every valley." His voice was grim. "They are not giving up, because I am a witness, because I can hang him." "Yes," Tobias urged the horse forward. "We need to reach that timber before they sweep this direction. Hold tight." They made it into the cover of a thick pine forest, just as the sun touched the western peaks. Tobias dismounted and led the horse deeper into the trees, walking beside it with his hand on the reins, Sarah still in the saddle. He moved with the patience of a man who knew the value of silence and caution. As darkness fell, he found another sheltered spot, this time beneath a fallen tree that created a natural windbreak. He made no fire, too risky with Dalton so close. They ate cold rations and drank from a stream, and then settled in to wait out the night. "It will be cold," Tobias said. "Better conserve warmth." He sat with his back against the fallen tree trunk and gestured for Sarah to sit beside him. She hesitated only a moment before settling against his side. He pulled both blankets around them, creating a shared cocoon of warmth, and Sarah found herself tucked against his chest, his arm around her shoulders, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "This is proper, right?" She found herself asking. "I mean, with you telling people I am your wife and all." She felt rather than heard his quiet laugh. "I suppose if we are pretending to be married, sitting close for warmth is the least scandalous thing we could do." "True enough." Sarah relaxed a little, letting herself absorb his warmth. She had not been this close to a man since her father died 3 years ago. It felt strange and also completely natural, as if her body had been waiting to fit against Tobias's side like a missing puzzle piece finally found. "Tell me about your brother," Tobias said quietly. "What was he like?" Sarah closed her eyes, remembering. "His name was Daniel. He was 4 years older than me, always looking out for me after our parents passed. We came west 2 years ago, hoping to strike it rich like everyone else. Never found much gold, but Daniel did not care. He loved the mountains, loved the freedom. He said even if we never got rich, at least we were living on our own terms." "Sounds like a good man." "He was the best man I ever knew," her voice caught. "He taught me to shoot, to ride, to survive out here. He always said I was tougher than half the men in Fort Lyon and twice as smart. When Marcus Dalton started pressuring him to sell his claim, Daniel refused. Said he had a right to work his own land, that he was not going to be bullied by some corrupt businessman who thought he owned the whole territory. "That is what got him killed," Tobias said softly. "Yes." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes again. "I saw it happen. I had ridden up to bring Daniel his lunch, and I heard them arguing. I stayed back, scared. Dalton pulled his gun and shot my brother in the chest before Daniel could even defend himself. Then he and his men buried him like he was nothing, like his life did not matter at all." Tobias's arm tightened around her. "His life mattered, and you are going to make sure his death means something. We are going to bring Dalton to justice." "I am scared," Sarah admitted. "What if we do not make it to Denver? What if they catch us?" "They will not." The certainty in his voice steadied her. "I have been doing this work for 6 years, Sarah. I know how to stay ahead of men like Dalton, and I promise you I will get you to safety. I swear it on my father's grave." Sarah turned her face up to look at him in the darkness. She could barely see his features, just the strong line of his jaw, the glint of his eyes. "Why does this feel like more than just you doing your job?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough, almost reluctant. "Because it is more. I knew it the moment I pulled you into hiding yesterday. I knew it when I saw the fear in your eyes and the courage, both at once. I knew it when you climbed these mountains without complaining, even though I could see you were in pain. This stopped being just a job about 2 hours after I met you." Sarah's heart was hammering now. "Tobias." "I know it is too soon," he said quickly. "I know this is not the time or place, but I wanted you to know. I wanted you to understand why I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe, not just because it is my job, because I care what happens to you. Because I think I started caring about you the moment I saw you running through those woods." She should have been frightened by the intensity of his words, by the speed of everything that was happening between them. But she was not. Instead, she felt something opening up inside her chest, something warm and bright and terrifying in the best way. "I care about you too," she whispered. "I do not understand it. We barely know each other, but I feel safe with you in a way I have never felt with anyone, not even Daniel. Like you would fight the whole world to protect me if you had to." "I would." He said it simply, a statement of fact. "I will." Sarah reached up and touched his face, her fingers finding the rough stubble of his jaw in the darkness. "Then I guess we are in this together, whatever happens." "Whatever happens," he agreed. And then, so gently she barely felt it at first, he kissed her. It was soft and careful, a question more than a demand. Sarah answered by pressing closer, her hand sliding up to cup the back of his neck. The kiss deepened, still tender but with a heat beneath it, a promise of everything they were not saying out loud. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Tobias rested his forehead against hers. "We should stop. Probably. You need rest. Tomorrow will be another hard day." "I know." But Sarah did not move away, and neither did he. They stayed like that, wrapped in blankets and each other, until exhaustion finally pulled them both into sleep. The next 3 days followed the same pattern. They rode north by hidden trails, stopping frequently so Tobias could scout ahead and make sure they stayed clear of Dalton's search parties. Twice more they saw riders in the distance, and once they heard dogs baying in a valley below them. Each time, Tobias laid false trails that led away from their actual path, breaking branches in misleading directions, leaving scraps of cloth by streams they never followed, once even backtracking their own trail for half a mile before cutting sideways through a rocky stretch that held no tracks. "Where did you learn all this?" Sarah asked on the 3rd day, watching him carefully arrange stones to look like a horse had passed through, when in fact they were heading in the opposite direction. "From the Apache, mostly." Tobias straightened up, surveying his handiwork. "Spent 2 years living with them when I first came to the territory. They taught me how to move through the land like I am part of it, not fighting against it, how to see what is really there, not just what I expect to see. That must have been something. It was the hardest and best thing I ever did. He helped her back onto the horse. They have got no reason to trust white men, and I do not blame them. But their scoutmaster, man named Neal, he saw something in me, I guess. Took me under his wing. Everything I know about tracking, about surviving out here, I learned from him. Is he still alive? Tobias's expression darkened. No. His band got rounded up and forced onto a reservation 5 years ago. He tried to escape, got shot by soldiers. I was not there. I was off chasing claim jumpers in Utah. By the time I heard what happened, it was too late. I am sorry. Me too. He swung up into the saddle in front of her. But it taught me something. Sometimes the law is not just. Sometimes the people enforcing it are the real criminals. That is why I only work for marshals I trust, men who actually care about justice, not just power. And that is why I will do whatever it takes to bring down men like Dalton, who think they can kill and steal and get away with it because they have money and connections. Sarah wrapped her arms around his waist as the horse started moving. You are a good man, Tobias Everett. She felt him relax slightly at her words. Just trying to do right. That is all any of us can do. They reached the cabin near Leadville on the evening of the 4th day. It was a rough structure, barely more than 4 walls and a roof, but it was hidden in a fold of the mountains where no one would stumble across it by accident. Tobias had used it before as a safe house when working in the area. We can risk a fire here, he said, checking to make sure the place was secure. And there is a spring just outside. We will stay 3 days, let Dalton wear himself out searching south of here, then we will move on to Denver. Sarah was so grateful to be off the horse, and under a roof she could have cried. Tobias built a fire in the small stone hearth, and the cabin quickly warmed. There was even a bed, a simple frame with a rope mattress and a thin straw tick, but it looked like luxury after 4 nights sleeping on the ground. You take the bed, Tobias said. I will sleep by the fire. We have been sleeping side by side for 3 nights, Sarah pointed out. The bed is big enough for both of us, and it is warmer that way. He hesitated, and she saw the conflict in his face, the desire to be close to her warring with his sense of propriety. Tobias, we have already agreed this is more than you just doing your job. I trust you, and I am exhausted. Please, all right, he said it quietly, but only if you are sure. I am sure. They ate a hot meal the first in days, made from supplies Tobias had cached in the cabin. Beans and bacon and coffee, simple food that tasted like a feast. As they ate, they talked about everything and nothing. Sarah told him about growing up in Missouri, about her mother who died when she was 12, her father who passed 2 years later from pneumonia. Tobias talked about his childhood in Kansas, about his mother who still lived there, running a boarding house in Dodge City. You see her often? Sarah asked. Not as often as I should, maybe once a year if I am lucky. This work keeps me moving. He looked at her across the firelight. But I have been thinking lately about settling down somewhere, getting a little ranch maybe, raising horses. Having a life that is more than just chasing outlaws through the mountains. That sounds nice, Sarah said softly. Peaceful. It does it not? His eyes held hers. Especially if I had someone to share it with. The implication hung between them, heavy with promise. Sarah felt her face flush, felt her heart start that rapid pattering again. I think I would like that too, she managed to say. The settling down part, having a real home again. They cleaned up from dinner in companionable silence, and then Tobias banked the fire for the night. They lay down together on the narrow bed, and it felt natural, inevitable to curl into his arms, her head on his chest, his hands stroking her hair. Sarah, he said into the darkness. Yes. When this is over, when Dalton is in jail and you are safe, I want to court you properly. I want to take you to dinner and dances and all the things people do when they are getting to know each other. I want to do this right. Sarah smiled against his chest. I would like that, though I think we are getting to know each other pretty well already considering the circumstances. True. She could hear the smile in his voice. But still, I want to do right by you. I want everyone to know that I am the luckiest man in Colorado because you gave me a chance. She lifted her head to look at him. In the faint glow from the banked fire, she could just make out his features, the serious set of his mouth, the tenderness in his eyes. I already gave you a chance, she said. The moment I let you pull me into hiding instead of running from you, the moment I trusted you with my life. I know. And I am going to spend the rest of my days making sure you never regret that trust. He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Sarah lost herself in the feeling of his mouth on hers, his hands gentle on her face, her neck, her waist. They kissed until they were both breathless, until the fire between them was threatening to burn out of control, and then Tobias pulled back with obvious effort. We should stop, he said roughly. I want to do this right, Sarah. I want to marry you first. I want to be able to give you everything properly, not stolen moments in a cabin while we are running for our lives. Sarah was surprised by the sharp pang of disappointment but also touched by his restraint, his desire to honor her. You are right. I want that too. I want to do this properly. When we get to Denver, Tobias said, when Dalton is arrested and you are safe, I am going to ask you to marry me. And I hope to God you say yes, because I cannot imagine my life without you in it now. Ask me in Denver, Sarah whispered, and I promise you the answer will be yes. They fell asleep holding each other, and Sarah dreamed of a little ranch in the mountains, of horses grazing in green meadows, of a life where she was not running, where she was not afraid, where she could wake up every morning in Tobias's arms and know that she was home. The 3 days in the cabin passed too quickly. They rested, ate hot food, and talked for hours. Tobias taught Sarah more about tracking, about reading the landscape, about survival skills she might need. Sarah talked about her dreams, about wanting to maybe open a dress shop someday or teach school, something that would let her put down roots and be part of a community. You would be a good teacher, Tobias said. You are patient and smart and you explain things clearly. You think so? I know so. I have been watching you these past days. The way you learn things, the way you remember everything I teach you, any school would be lucky to have you. On the morning of the 4th day, Tobias went out to scout and came back with his face grim. What is wrong? Sarah asked immediately. Dalton pulled back his search parties. They are all heading south toward Fort Lyon. He did not look happy about it. Isn't that good? Does it not mean we can travel more easily, maybe? Or maybe it means he has figured out we are heading for Denver and he is going to try to cut us off. Tobias paced the small cabin. We need to move carefully from here on out. Take the long route, stay off any roads where he might have men waiting. How long will it take? Another week, maybe 10 days. He stopped pacing and looked at her. Are you ready for this? Sarah thought about her brother, about Daniel's blood soaking into the Colorado dirt, about Marcus Dalton riding away like he had done nothing wrong. She thought about all the other people he had probably killed, all the lives he had destroyed. And she thought about Tobias, about the future they were planning together, about the life that waited on the other side of this testimony. I am ready, she said firmly. Let us finish this. They left the cabin that afternoon, heading east now instead of north, taking a route that would swing wide of Fort Lyon and bring them to Denver from the south. It was longer and harder, crossing high passes and deep valleys, but Tobias assured her it was safer. 2 days into the journey, they met their first people, a wagon train of settlers heading west to try their luck in California. Tobias and Sarah joined them for an evening, sharing their fire, and to anyone watching they were exactly what they claimed to be, newlyweds heading to Denver where Tobias had a job waiting. "You are natural," Tobias murmured to her as they lay in their bedrolls that night, separated from the wagons by a respectful distance. "Playing my wife." "It does not feel like playing," Sarah admitted. "It feels like practicing for the real thing." His hand found hers in the darkness and squeezed. "Soon. Just a few more days and this will all be over. Then we can start our real life together." But the next morning brought trouble. A rider came galloping into the wagon camp, a young man Sarah recognized from Fort Lyon, one of Dalton's employees. Her blood went cold. "You folks seen a woman traveling alone?" the rider called out. "Dark hair, mid-20s, might be injured or dressed in men's clothes. There is a reward for information leading to her capture. She is wanted for murder." The wagon master shook his head. "Ain't seen nobody like that. Just my family's here and this young couple heading to Denver." The rider's eyes swept over Tobias and Sarah forced herself to meet his gaze calmly, her hand resting on Tobias's arm like any wife would. After a long moment, the rider looked away. "Well, you see her. You send word to Marcus Dalton in Fort Lyon. $500 for information." He wheeled his horse and rode off toward the next settlement. As soon as he was out of sight, Tobias turned to Sarah. "We need to leave. Now. If he remembers you, if he goes back and describes us to Dalton, they will know." They said quick goodbyes to the wagon train and headed out, pushing hard to put distance between themselves and the main trail. Tobias led them into rough country where horses would have trouble following, where the rocky ground left no tracks. That night, camped in a narrow canyon, Tobias held Sarah close. "I am sorry, I thought we were clear of them. It is not your fault, you have kept me alive this long, I trust you to keep doing it." She looked up at him. "We are going to make it to Denver, I know we are." "Yes, we are." He kissed her forehead. "And then, I am going to marry you and take you so far away from Fort Lyon and Marcus Dalton that you will never have to think about any of this again." "I will always think about Daniel," Sarah said quietly. "But I want to think about him in peace, knowing his killer faced justice. That is the only way I can move forward, the only way I can let myself be happy again." "You deserve to be happy, Sarah. You deserve everything good this world has to offer. So do you." She touched his face. "You have spent 6 years chasing other people's justice. When do you get to have your own happiness?" "When I see you safe," he said simply. "That is when I get my happiness. Everything I want is right here." They made love that night for the first time, slow and tender and full of promise. It was not a decision they discussed, just a natural progression of everything they had been building between them since the moment they met. Afterward, lying tangled together in the blankets, Sarah felt changed in some fundamental way. Not just because of the physical intimacy, but because she had given herself completely to this man, trusted him with every part of her, and he had cherished that trust like the precious gift it was. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too." Tobias's arms tightened around her. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a week, but I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." "Then marry me," Sarah said. "Not in Denver. Now, here, just us and these mountains and God as our witness." "I do not want to wait any more. I do not want one more day to go by where I am not your wife in every way that matters." Tobias pulled back to look at her, and even in the faint starlight she could see the emotion in his face. "Are you sure? There is no preacher out here, no legal document." "I am sure. We can do the legal part in Denver if you want, but I want the real marriage to happen now. I want to promise myself to you right here, right now, before anything else can happen." So they spoke their vows there in the wilderness, with the stars wheeling overhead and the wind singing through the canyon. They promised to love and honor each other, to stand together through whatever came, to build a life based on trust and respect, and the fierce tenderness they had found in each other. They had no rings, so Tobias took a leather cord from around his neck and tied it gently around Sarah's wrist, and she did the same for him with a strip of cloth torn from her petticoat. "I take you as my wife," Tobias said solemnly. "From this moment forward, everything I have and everything I am belongs to you." "I take you as my husband," Sarah replied, her voice shaking with emotion. "From this moment forward, my life is bound to yours. Whatever comes, we face it together." They sealed the vows with a kiss, and when they made love again, it was different, sweeter, because now they belonged to each other in every way possible. The next 5 days were the strangest and most beautiful of Sarah's life. They were still running, still careful, still watching for any sign of Dalton's men. But now they were husband and wife, and somehow that changed everything. The fear was still there, but it was balanced by joy, by the certainty that no matter what happened, they had found something precious and real in the midst of chaos. They crossed the last range of mountains and came down onto the plains that stretched toward Denver. The city was visible in the distance, a cluster of buildings growing steadily larger as they approached. Tobias kept them off the main roads until the last possible moment, circling around to enter Denver from the east rather than the more direct southern route. It was September 20th when they finally rode down Larimer Street toward the marshal's office. Sarah was dirty and exhausted and scared, but she was also proud. She had survived. She had made it, and now she was going to see her brother's killer brought to justice. The territorial marshal was a tall, weathered man in his 50s named John Breckenridge. He listened to Sarah's story with the careful attention of someone who had heard too many tales of violence and injustice, and believed every word she said. "I've been trying to build a case against Dalton for 2 years, Breckenridge said when Sarah finished. "But no one would testify. You are brave, Mrs. Everett. Your brother would be proud of you." Hearing herself called Mrs. Everett sent a warm flutter through Sarah's chest. Tobias's hand found hers under the table and squeezed. "What happens now?" Tobias asked. "Now I send deputies to Fort Lyon to arrest Marcus Dalton and bring him back here for trial. With Mrs. Everett's testimony, we have him dead to rights." Breckenridge looked at Sarah. "You will need to stay in Denver until the trial. Could be a few weeks, maybe a month." "We will stay," Sarah said firmly. "However long it takes." Breckenridge nodded. "I will arrange protection for you just in case Dalton has men in Denver, but they were too late." That night, as Sarah and Tobias were settling into a hotel room Breckenridge had arranged, a commotion erupted in the street below. Sarah ran to the window and saw deputies surrounding a group of riders who had just come into town. "That is them," she gasped. "That is Dalton and his men." Tobias was beside her in an instant, his gun already in his hand. "Stay here. Lock the door." "No, I am coming with you. He does not get to scare me anymore." They went down together, Tobias staying close to Sarah's side. In the street, lit by torches and the spill of light from saloons, Marcus Dalton sat on his horse, surrounded by a dozen deputies with rifles trained on him and his 4 companions. "Marcus Dalton, you are under arrest for the murder of Daniel Lancaster," Marshal Breckenridge announced in a voice that carried down the street. "You will come with us peacefully, or we will take you by force." Dalton's eyes swept the crowd and landed on Sarah, his face twisted with rage. "There she is. That is the woman I have been hunting. She is a murderer. She killed one of my men." "That is a lie," Sarah called out, stepping forward despite Tobias's attempt to hold her back. "I saw you murder my brother, Mr. Dalton. I saw you shoot him in cold blood and bury him in a shallow grave, and I am going to testify to that in a court of law." "You little witch," Dalton snarled. "You do not know what you have done. I will make you pay for this. I will make you wish you had died in those mountains." "That is enough." Breckenridge's voice cracked like a whip. "Dalton, you are making this worse for yourself. Now are you going to come peacefully, or do we do this the hard way?" For a moment, Sarah thought Dalton would pull his gun, would try to shoot his way out. His hand moved toward his holster, and every deputy tightened their grip on their rifles. But then Dalton seemed to deflate, realizing he was outnumbered and outmaneuvered. "This is not over," he said, glaring at Sarah. "You hear me, girl? This is not over." "Yes, it is," Sarah replied, and her voice was steady, strong. "It is over, and you lost." The deputies pulled Dalton and his men from their horses and marched them toward the jail. As they passed Sarah, Dalton spat at her feet, but she did not flinch. She just stood there, Tobias's hand warm in hers, and watched justice begin. The trial took 3 weeks to organize and another week to complete. Sarah testified for 2 full days, recounting everything she had seen, every detail of her brother's murder. Dalton's lawyers tried to discredit her, tried to paint her as a liar and a thief, but Marshal Breckenridge had found other witnesses, other people Dalton had cheated and threatened. One by one, they came forward, no longer afraid now that Dalton was locked in a jail cell. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they came back, the verdict was unanimous: guilty of murder in the 1st degree. The judge sentenced Marcus Dalton to hang and set the execution date for November 1st. Sarah and Tobias were in the courtroom when the sentence was read. She did not feel joy at hearing Dalton would die, just a deep, weary sense of completion. Her brother could rest now. Justice had been served. "It is over," she said to Tobias as they left the courthouse. "It is really over. It is." He pulled her into his arms right there on the courthouse steps, not caring who saw. "You did it, Sarah. You were so brave, so strong. Your brother would be so proud of you." "I could not have done it without you." She looked up at him. "You saved my life. You gave me a reason to keep fighting." "You gave me something too," Tobias said softly. "You gave me a reason to believe in something besides just chasing outlaws and trying to live up to my father's memory. You gave me a future to look forward to instead of just a past to run from." They were married officially 2 days later, in a small church in Denver, with Marshal Breckenridge and his wife standing as witnesses. Sarah wore a simple blue dress she had bought with money Breckenridge had given her as witness fees, and Tobias wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed for the occasion. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Tobias kissed her, Sarah felt like her heart might burst from happiness. After the wedding, they talked about their plans. Tobias still had some money saved from his years working as a tracker, and Sarah would receive compensation from the territory for her testimony. It was enough to make a start. They traveled west from Denver, up into the mountains near a little town called Silverton. There they found a beautiful valley with a creek running through it and grass that would be perfect for horses. Tobias bought 200 acres, and they spent the winter building a cabin, a real home with glass windows and a wooden floor and a stone fireplace big enough to keep the whole place warm. By spring, they had bought 3 horses and started building their herd. Tobias proved to have a gift for training horses, and Sarah discovered she loved working with the animals too. They were gentle and patient with each other, learning together how to build a ranch, how to build a life. In June, Sarah realized she was pregnant. When she told Tobias, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Sarah asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. Happy does not even begin to describe it. He set her down gently, his hands framing her face. You have given me everything, Sarah. A home, a future, and now a family. I never thought I could be this happy. Their son was born in February of 1880, a healthy baby boy with his father's eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Daniel, after Sarah's brother, and Thomas for Tobias's father. Little Daniel was the joy of their lives, a happy, curious child who toddled after his father around the ranch and helped his mother feed the horses as soon as he was old enough to carry a bucket. Over the years, the ranch prospered. They expanded their herd, built a bigger barn, hired a couple of hands to help with the work. Sarah finally opened a small dress shop in Silverton, fulfilling her dream of having a business of her own. She only worked 2 days a week, enough to enjoy the creativity and community, but not so much that it took her away from her family. 3 years after Daniel was born, they had a daughter, Catherine, named after Tobias's mother. Katie was a wild, fearless little thing who climbed trees and rode horses before she could properly walk. 2 years after that came another son, Samuel, quieter than his siblings, but with a quick mind and a gentle heart. On warm summer evenings, the Everett family would sit on their porch and watch the sun set over the mountains. Tobias would have an arm around Sarah, and the children would be running around the yard, playing with the dogs, and Sarah would think about how far she had come from that terrified woman running through the woods. Sometimes she still dreamed about that time, about the dogs baying in the distance and the fear that had driven her forward. But mostly she dreamed about Tobias pulling her into hiding, about his steady voice promising her she would be safe, about the moment she realized she had fallen in love with this quiet, intense man who had risked everything to save her. You ever regret it? She asked him once, years later when the children were grown and starting families of their own. Giving up your work as a tracker to build this ranch? Not for 1 second, Tobias replied, pulling her closer. This right here, you and our children and this life we built, this is everything I ever wanted. You are everything I ever wanted. Even though we met because I was running for my life, especially because of that. He kissed her temple. Because it means I got to be the one to save you. I got to be the one you trusted, and that trust led to everything else, all the years we have had together, all the love we have built. I would do it all again, Sarah said softly. Every terrifying moment of it if I knew it led to you. They lived long, full lives, surrounded by children and grandchildren, their ranch prospering, their love growing deeper with each passing year. When Sarah was 73, she passed away peacefully in her sleep, with Tobias holding her hand. He followed her just 6 months later, unable or unwilling to face a world without her in it. Their children buried them on a hillside overlooking the ranch, beneath 2 pine trees that had grown intertwined, their branches mixing so thoroughly it was impossible to tell where one tree ended and the other began. The story of how Tobias Everett saved Sarah Lancaster from the men hunting her through the woods became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. And always, the story ended the same way, with the reminder that true love is not just finding the right person, but being willing to risk everything to save them, to stand beside them through whatever comes, and to build something beautiful out of even the darkest beginnings. That was the legacy Sarah and Tobias left behind, not just in the ranch they built or the family they raised, but in the example they set of what love truly means, of what it means to promise yourself to another person, and then spend every day of your life honoring that promise. Their love story, born in desperation and fear, had transformed into something extraordinary, something that would be remembered and celebrated long after they were gone. A testament to the power of courage, faith, and the kind of love that endures through every trial and emerges stronger on the other side.